The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. This is Brian Ankney with Auto Success Magazine. Hey, I really appreciate you all taking the time to join us today. Today's webinar is it's a really interesting topic. We're going to talk about how to maximize auto sales with a mobile showroom quarterback. And this is actually an idea that was new to me until Kevin, my guest today, explained it to me, and I think it's a wonderful idea. It really is a way to increase your customers' engagement and really keep them busy. You know, a lot of times during the sales process, you know, we feel like we're busy, but the majority of the time the customer in most dealerships spends that time alone. And what do people do when they're alone? They pull out their smartphone, which provides an opportunity for them to, you know, look at your competitors, to look at other deals, to get, you know, buyer's remorse. There's a lot of things that can happen. So rather than allowing that to happen, Kevin's going to share with us today how you can create a mobile-enabled showroom quarterback to help keep the customer engaged and improve the buying process and the customer satisfaction. Kevin, if you would, please. You know, oh, actually, you know, before we get started, a couple of things I want to share with everybody. One, if you haven't yet, go to Facebook, join Auto Success Webinars. It's a group on Facebook. Just type it in the search bar, and it'll bring it up. Request to join. It's a great place to interact with our speakers and as well as other people that are watching these webinars. You know, today you're going to learn a lot of new things, and as you try to implement them, you know, you're going to have successes and failures, as will everyone else on this webinar, and it's a great place to share those successes and failures and learn from each other. In addition to that, I'd like to you know, draw everybody's attention. If you're on a laptop or you're on a desktop, look to the right side of your screen, and you will see the little go to webinar bar, and there, where it says questions, you click on the plus sign, and you can type in any questions that you have right there. We'll hold the questions till the end, but we will get to all of them. And if you're on a smartphone or a tablet, depending on the size of the tablet, it's either at the top or the bottom, whether it's Apple or Android, and you'll see it's just a question mark to ask the questions. Kevin, if you would, please take it away, my friend.
Thanks a lot, Brian. I really appreciate it. So we're going to be talking about maximizing your sales using a concept we call the mobile showroom quarterback. And let's first define exactly what the problem we're trying to solve is here. Here's the problem. The statistics tell us that 63% of prospects on your lot right now are shopping on their smartphones. They're looking at all sorts of other competitors' information, all sorts of other information such as dealer rater, talking to their friends, doing all sorts of other things besides paying attention to the product and the message that you've got on your showroom floor. And that's a real problem. Let's look at this a little bit visually. You see, we've got we've got your lot listed out here with people all over the place looking at various cars. But the problem is that 63% means that all these different people, these people here, and here, and here, and here, and even here, are all probably looking at their smartphones rather than paying attention to the sales process where you want them to be focused. Certainly they're involved in the car buying process, but not in the way that you feel they should be in the process that you own. So how do we fix that? Well, the first thing to understand is what the heck they're doing. So to break this down a little bit, about 25% of them are doing competitive pricing comparisons, looking at the same model from different vendors and seeing who's got the best deal. 19% of them are figuring out what kind of deal they can get on their trade-in, and about 18% of them are calculating what their payments might be. 17% are researching what the best price for the vehicle is from third-party sources, and about 10% are looking for incentives and offers to make it a better deal for them. 9% are reading dealer reviews at sites like DealerRater. 7% are researching financing and how they're going to pay for this. 10% are reading advice on how to shop for cars. Probably they should have done that before they came to the dealership, but they're starting it now. 9% are fact-checking what your staff tells them and seeing whether or not what they're saying is true. And about 22% are checking competitor inventory to see if they've got the model that they want, the color that you might not have. So there's a lot going on. All of this is taking away from the sales process that your team is trying to engage them in. And so that's a huge problem. When do they get sucked in? Brian mentioned this a little bit, but a couple of specific areas. Anytime the salesperson leaves them alone. Last time I went shopping for cars, I went to many dealerships, and I noticed again and again people walking away from me and going to go do something else. They were asking questions of other people, the sales manager, maybe other people on staff. They might have been checking something on another computer. The downside is they left me alone. And in various cases, they do it a couple times. That gives me an opportunity to not only check my smartphone, but possibly even leave and just walk out of the dealership at that time. Very often, shoppers get sucked in their smartphones when the salesperson doesn't have the information they're looking for, so they go looking for it themselves. And also in the handoffs that are going on, waiting for someone, like the sales manager to join you when you're ready to hand them off to F&I, all those different single places where you're handing off between people is a very, very common place for the shopper to get sucked into their smartphone and start looking at the competitor offers, what their inventory is, what other incentives and offers are out there, the things that are going to distract them from buying from you. And then finally, if there's an interruption, say an overhead page, ringing phones, all these kind of things will disrupt the process, disengage, and give that customer the chance to go look at something else. And the real downside of all of this is the statistics show us nowadays that the average customer only visits 1.6 showrooms. If they break free from your showroom, if they walk away and get sucked into somebody else, then you probably lost them. You're going to go buy at the other showroom that they're going to. That's what we want to try and prevent here. So how do we do that? What's the solution? Well, first, you've got to stay engaged with the customer at all times. You've got to have all the answers, which is really difficult. No one person can have all the answers, but that's what this process here today is going to show you how to fix that. You need to minimize delays and make sure that there aren't those gaps where you're waiting for the sales manager to show up, waiting to be able to bring them in to talk with F&I about signing all the paperwork. And you've got to reduce distractions, eliminate those things that are going to give them the chance to just get out of the zone, be disrupted, and so that they'll get focused on their smartphone. So that brings us to our mobile showroom quarterback method, to keep the customer engaged with us rather than looking at their screen. And there's several parts to it. The first is talking about how to stay engaged with the customer, then picking the quarterback, getting involved with special teams, learning to run well-timed plays, making sure to use the silent count, and finally keeping score. Yes, you're going to get a lot of football references in this session today. So first, stay engaged. The customer's got a lot of questions. This is the number one thing that they're doing. They're looking for information on their smartphone, whether they're fact-checking what your salesperson is saying, looking at inventory, trying to understand financing, getting advice on how to buy, all these various things. They've got a lot of questions. And your sales team has to stay on top of all of them. They can't go looking for answers. They can't leave. They can't pull out their smartphones and look for answers. They've got to stay engaged with the customer and talking to them. So how do you accomplish this? Well, I look to my past days in the military for an answer to this problem. You have frontline operators in the military who are engaged in combat or on patrol. They cannot take their attention away from what's right in front of them, just like your salesperson can't take your attention away from the customer right in front of them. But what they can do is when they have a problem, when they need more information, what the military does is use a concept called reach back to get help from the rest of the team. They reach back to their operations center by making a quick query, asking for more information, and those guys go do the research, figure out what the answer is, and then provide the simple answer back to the frontline operators. This is the same technique that we're going to be talking about using here for the rest of this session, reaching back to other people to get help. So then the sales team gets asked a question, the customer wants to know something, all they have to do is make a quick query out, ask for someone else for the help, and then they can stay focused on the customer. When the answer comes back, they get a message back, and they get help from the rest of the team. The key thing here is to have the tool set to allow them to send that message out and get the answer back. Once you do that, now your sales team doesn't ever have to disengage. They can stay focused on the customer, they can stay talking to them, but they can still get the answers. They can be the source of information. And once you start this cycle, the customer leans on you, the salesperson, for the answers rather than looking for it on the internet. Once you become that trusted source of information by having the answer the first couple of times, they will get even more engaged with you. And so it's what we call a virtuous cycle where things get better and better and better. So remember, we got to stay engaged. And a couple of key points to make that happen. First, the sales team is only going to reach out if they trust that they will get an answer. They have to believe when they put that question out there, someone's going to answer them back. So that means you have to develop a supportive team approach where everyone is focused on getting answers quickly to that sales team. And then you must train the sales team itself on how to quickly ask questions via your instant messaging solution so that they're not spending a bunch of time having to fumble through that question. All of this only works, though, if you have the correct structure in place. And that structure is our mobile showroom quarterback. What do I mean by that? Well, the showroom quarterback is all about being the one person that receives the ball. In this case, the ball is the questions from the sales team. Remember how we just said the sales team must trust that they're going to get an answer. They can't be worried that Joe has walked away from his desk and he's not seeing what the message is. They can't be querying out to 5 people, all of which say, oh, someone else will get that. They have to have a single point of contact, someone that they're always handing the ball to, and that's the quarterback. And then the quarterback's job is to go out and figure out who's going to have the right information. They're going to go reach out to various other people and bring them in. So our salesperson has a question. They use their IM client on their phone to pitch the ball to the quarterback. The quarterback receives the question, figures out whoever is appropriate to answer, whether that's the sales manager, another member of the sales team, the finance team, service, whoever's got the right place, then they can pass the question out to those people and get the answer, and they're the ones responsible, the quarterback, for communicating back to the sales team. The end result is that the salesperson only has one person they have to contact, and they can begin to feel trust in the idea that when they put that question out there, they're going to get an answer. They can begin to have that feeling of, hey, look, when I do this, it works. I know one person's responsible, they're going to get back to me, and it's a successful process. Every once in a while, the quarterback may just have to run the ball themselves. The quarterback could be searching for the answers online to a question that's in left field, or maybe it's an inventory search, looking at a competitor site, these kind of things. So that quarterback doesn't just hand off questions. Sometimes they're the ones going and looking for the answer themselves. But the key is they're going to be the person who is responsible for getting the answer and getting it back to the salesperson. So what does this showroom quarterback look like? First, it's not usually a full-time role. This is something I get asked. People think, oh, this is another role I got to hire, and somebody. This job is not that much of a working role, but you do have to have somebody who has what I call an interruptible job. This is somebody who's sitting at a desk throughout their day, who may be working on things, whether it's paperwork, something else, where they are able to take queries as it comes in and be able to stop what they're working on at the moment. If you have somebody who's customer-facing and has to be involved with that customer, they're not a good choice to be the showroom quarterback, because now they have competing priorities. Do they answer the instant message from the salesperson? Do they deal with the customer right in front of them? So choose somebody who's more of a back office person. You need somebody who likes to find answers, somebody who's a problem solver, who takes joy in going out and going, oh, I've got the right answer. That's the perfect mentality for this role, because that's what they're going to be doing. And people often ask what kind of incentive plan. Generally, we focus on an incentive plan where the compensation is based upon the success of the sales team, because they are, just like many others, a large enabler of the sales team. And finally, they must have an IM system to communicate with the sales team. It needs to be something that is an enterprise class system, which means that you can track what those conversations are, you can record them for later use, they can be monitored, because those are just basic business liability kind of things. You don't want to have people just sending text messages back and forth to each other, because you've got no control over it as a business owner. You have no visibility into it, and that's a recipe for disaster. So you've got to have the right technology backing all of this up. The final thing I'll mention is this doesn't necessarily have to be one person. As long as there's one person in the rotation who's the quarterback at any given time, you may have different people taking on this role during the week, during the day, as their job responsibilities change. So you can hand off the role as well. It just needs to be that any time that they've got ownership, everybody knows that they're getting to the right quarterback. So we've picked a quarterback. We've got a single point of communication. Everybody knows that's who they go to for answers. They're not trying to contact 5 different people. They're contacting one person, and that one person is utterly responsible. This minimizes confusion and elevates trust as everybody knows who owns and who's got the ball. Like I said, this is the key thing that develops that trust that we saw in the first point. We've got to do to get people to use the system in the first place. So now we've got our quarterback. Well, there's some other things that the quarterback can use to be more successful. One of them is what I call special teams. These are people who have special expertise and knowledge, different roles. Obvious ones are like the sales manager, the F&I manager, service manager. These are people who have specific responsibilities already within the organization. They're certainly part of the special team. But there's another one that I want to specifically talk about. We all live and die today by the internet, and especially things like internet reviews are very important. And no matter how good your dealership is, no matter how great you are, everyone has bad reviews. It's going to happen. These 2 reviews happen to be for one of the best reviewed dealerships in my entire state here in Colorado. And yet even they get 1-star reviews. And just one negative review can result in the potential of losing up to 22% of prospects. A huge number. So how do you deal with that? You probably already got somebody who's being your expert on reviews. If you don't have that, you're going to have a situation where the sales team can be blindsided. They don't know what's going on. They can't explain it. When somebody is on their smartphone starting to look at that review and say, hey, well, what happened here? They need to be able to ask questions about that and get the quick answer. They need somebody on the special team who is a review expert who can provide answers and explanations. That person needs to be familiar with literally every bad review out there. They need to know all of them so that they can be able to explain, provide context, and make the customer feel better. The good news is you probably already have that person. You already have somebody who's doing this. Your head of internet marketing, head of sales may be doing this as well. But you've got to have a person assigned to know all those reviews. In addition to your various department managers, this is going to make up your special teams. That review expert really needs to have some kind of context, some kind of story for every negative review. And your showroom quarterback needs to know who that person is. Just as they know who all the department heads are, they understand who the special teams they go to are. Which then leads us to execution, running well-timed plays. Once you've got the teams in place, once you've got the quarterback who's coordinating all of this and making sure that questions are coming in, they're being answered, being pushed back, you can extend the quarterback to doing even more. We all have a sales process, a play that we're running to get our person from an initial lead to an appointment, showroom floor, walk around, meet with the sales manager, go to F&I, sign the paperwork, we got a sale. Where that process looks a little different, what kind of steps you have, how things work, that may differ for a little bit, but we all have this play we got to run. And the problem is, there are the places here where we're doing handoffs, as I mentioned before. Steps where we may be waiting for a test drive vehicle to be pulled around, meeting with the sales manager, handing off to F&I. All these different points are places where delays can occur. The handoff may not occur cleanly. And that's a place for your prospect to get distracted, for them to start looking at their smartphone to see what the competitor's got, do all those things we don't want them to do. So we need to work on this timing as best we can. The quarterback is all about that. They're about that timing. They're going to pitch the ball to achieve perfect timing and result in big scores because they're going to make sure that there's a handoff cleanly between each phase. All that has to happen is the sales team says, hey, look, we're ready to meet with the sales manager. One quick message back to the quarterback. The quarterback's job is now to go call and page IM the sales manager to make sure that they're ready and available to cleanly receive the ball. Take that handoff from the customer and meet with them. And that's a step you never want to miss because statistics tell us that you're improving your odds of closing a deal by about 33% if you make sure that the sales manager meets with the customer. So, hey, we need to meet to close this in 5 minutes. We send that instant message over to the quarterback. The quarterback gets the sales manager involved. The handoff is clean. The play runs perfectly. We get the big score. This can happen at each stage. There's the test drive, it's the sales manager, it's F&I. We make sure all the handoffs are clean. We minimize those delays so that nobody is spending time looking at their phone instead. We're coordinating the next meeting silently so it happens seamlessly and everything just looks perfect for your prospect. They're amazed. They have no idea how it's happening. The prospect stays engaged. They don't have time to go looking at your competitor's site, looking at something else, finding out what kind of deal is going on down the street. So you're the dealership where they come in and buy. And that leads us to the silent count. So in football, a silent count is where the quarterback doesn't call out any numbers. Everything just happens silently. There's a hike, the play starts, and the other side may not have any idea what's going on. This is what we're trying to achieve in the dealership. We're talking about making sure that we don't have anything that's going to distract our customer, distract our prospect, have them interrupted by anything. So we don't want pages. We don't want announcements going on. We don't want phone calls ringing. We don't want notifications happening on our phones. Everything needs to go away. So we've got a completely silent count that keeps the prospect focused on the sales process. All those interruptions give the chance for the prospect to go check all those other items that we're trying to eliminate. We want them to stay in the zone and focused. And so we're going to maximize the silent count. And the great news is the same technology we're using for the quarterback can help us achieve this. If everybody's functionally able to communicate through an enterprise instant messaging system, then you don't need the overhead pages. You don't need lots of alerts. You're just focused on one communication methodology. So we want to eliminate the overhead paging. We want to use silent messaging. We want to directly transfer calls rather than telling people to pick up calls. We can even use presence technology to let the showroom quarterback know that people are with a customer. So your advanced communication technology can really make a whole big difference in what the experience is for that customer in the showroom. With a silent count going on, they're not distracted in any way. There's not a moment where everybody stops. There's not a moment where the sales process stops. We just end up succeeding. Oh, another option. Make sure to silence your phone, because as much as we can transfer and change everything about how the dealership works, if your mom calls, that's a distraction too. So our final thing is to make sure that we keep score. All the best quarterbacks keep score. You've got to understand how to measure success and know when you're succeeding. So a couple things to look at in scorekeeping methodologies. First, identify metrics that you already capture. What are the things you're already looking at that you're defining success with? Because if you've already got the information, that's the best way to be able to keep score. You don't have to go do new work. Second, measure a baseline before you start making changes. What I mean by that is before you start implementing all these changes to implement a showroom quarterback, you want to measure how you're doing today before it. So spend a little bit longer getting those stats, or if you've already got them historically, go ahead and look at them. Whether those are sales stats, conversion rates, etc., go ahead and make sure that you have a good grasp on them before you implement the change. And then finally, you need to define what success looks like very clearly. You need to understand what it is and communicate it to everybody so they all have a common picture of what you're going to be measuring and how you define success. A couple of don'ts. Don't choose a metric just because you can measure it. One of the worst things we see sometimes is people just start managing and start declaring success based on something because they've got a report on it, because they can see it. Make sure that what you're measuring matches up with that definition of success. Don't try and throw out additional customer surveys because we all know that customers are tired They're getting surveyed too much already. And on the similar light, don't try and create a new form, new field that your staff have to fill out, because they're probably getting tired of all this as well. Try and use as much as possible, unless it's absolutely critical, existing data, not new information. So what kind of things are we talking about here that you might measure? Well, you can look at the number of help requests you get from salespeople once you institute the mobile showroom process. The showroom quarterback can see how many requests that they're getting. Ask just the quarterback to provide feedback. How do they think it's going? This is different than having everybody in the staff report on a new form. You're just checking in with that one person to say, well, how's the process? Are there any impediments? Is it successful? Are you getting back answers quickly? Are there problems? And talk with that person in the quarterback position. Then ask your sales managers, your F&I manager, about the handoffs. Are the plays being run well timed? Are things going more smoothly thanks to this process? And then you can go use some of those sites like Dealer Rater to go find out what the customer comments are. Are they improving? Are you getting better ratings? Are people commenting on the process that it's a better dealer experience, a dealership experience? Are they saying that the showroom floor seems like a better place to be? These are certainly things that have a bit of a non-quantitative portion to them. There are people providing subjective answers, but you can still begin to measure by that by looking at how positive those comments are. Finally, of course, you can look at sales impact. This is the key one in the end. Are sales numbers improving? Are you closing more sales? Very common one is to compare the number of walk-ins and the number of appointments to the number of sales closes, because that's what we're really trying to change here, is the success of that last step. So you definitely want to keep score. You want to make sure that you are giving everybody the chance to succeed, and you only can do that by measuring it. That's the only way you can actually define success. And that means you've got to make the effort to do this. If you don't do this part, all the rest of it is at best maybe going to help. You have no idea. If you don't actually make the effort to keep score, there's no way you're going to know whether or not all these efforts have been successful. And you have to determine what exactly you're going to measure, what exactly success is going to look like. If you don't do these things, you're not going to be able to, really define whether or not it's succeeding or not. So let's review. When do shoppers get sucked in their smartphones? When the salesperson leaves them alone, the salesperson doesn't have the answer, the play isn't well timed, you have disruptions, you have delays, or when there's interruption, when there's something like an overhead page, or something else that's interrupting the flow of the sales engagement. And our mobile showroom quarterback helps us deal with that. It keeps the salesperson engaged with the prospect by giving them all the answers, a single point of contact they can go to, so they don't have to step away, they don't have to try and search themselves, or they don't have to say, I don't know. You use the silent count methodology to make sure there are no distractions. You run the handoffs cleanly by having well-timed plays where we're moving from test drive to sales manager to the F&I office without ever having any delays, any disruptions, any slowdowns. So that's it. Let's spend a little bit of time taking any questions about this process, anything you all want to talk about. I hope this, is an exciting idea for you guys.
Thank you. Actually, we've got some questions here. How many people do you use as quarterbacks, like within the dealership?
That's a great question. It really depends upon the size of your sales team, because and exactly how many actual appointments you're running during the day. I see a lot of people who are looking at this from the perspective of, oh, how many people, what do I have to do? That's where the full-time question comes from. But it really depends upon the volume of people that you've got coming into the showroom, appointments you're actually running, and the sales team that you've got. Honestly, we've seen that a person can handle this without even being full-time. If you've got a sales team of 10 to 15, you can have one sales or a quarterback running here. When it starts getting above that, that's when you start going, okay, maybe we need to have more than one.
All right. Actually, this next one is just a compliment. Mr. Anderson, thank you. He said, I think this is an awesome program. Well, thank you. Next question, Kevin, is should the dealership provide devices to the salespeople?
I don't think that's necessary. What you do want to do is make sure that the dealership is providing the application that they're using to communicate. You don't want to just use whatever off the shelf, instant messaging, text messaging. You want to provide them an application that you control, because that gives you visibility into the communication. You know what's happening. And when we talk about measurement, you can use this as a measurement technique as well. See how many messages are going back and forth to the quarterback. So we live in a world of, BYOD is the catchphrase, or bring your own device. And that works perfectly well. But you don't want to bring your own application. You want to make sure that everybody's communicating on the same platform. And that's something that has the ability for you to, record conversations in the instant messages, see how many are going on, who's communicating back and forth. You've got to have that visibility and control.
Okay. Next question is, you mentioned metrics at the end. Exactly what metrics should we use to gauge ROI?
Sure. I mean, the end ROI has got to come from what your sales conversion numbers are. They've got to look at number of people coming into the dealership versus the actual number of sales being made. That's what really drives the true return on investment number, because that's what's giving you your return. So you need to look at the baseline of what's happening before you engage this and give it a time period. This is not going to happen in the next week or even the next month. You're going to have to give it a couple of quarters before it really starts to kick in. In the interim, what you should be looking at, as I mentioned, is start looking at how many requests you're actually getting to the quarterback. With an enterprise instant messaging system, you can actually see that as a count. Are we getting enough questions going on between the two of them? But you can also then, as I mentioned, talk to the quarterback, find out what they think is happening back and forth, and then talk to your department heads, specifically F&I and sales, to see if the handoffs are working more effectively. But in the end, when you're talking about true R&I, it's about sales conversions. Whether or not you get those, that's going to determine whether or not you really get the return on this whole process.
All right. Another question. What do you do when the QB is busy and can't help?
So that's a great question. It's something that I just briefly touched upon. But you definitely need to have somebody else who's the backup QB in this case. You've got to make sure that nobody can be doing the job 24/7. You may have a person who's just the backup. You may be splitting into shifts. When that person has to go to lunch, whatever, you've got to have somebody who is the backup, and you've got to have a process for being able to get messages to them, so that you're basically able to always send messages to a common address. Both those people can see it, and that there's communication between both your primary and your backup. Think about it in a football game, since we're using all these analogies. You don't just leave the field as the quarterback without telling your backup quarterback, hey, you're going in the game. You don't just walk off the field, right?
All right. Kevin, next question is, how does this affect gross? And then it says stats.
Well, in the end, I'm going to have to try and interpret that a little bit, but it's going to affect the total number of actual sales that you get from new car sales. So that's where it's going to affect the entire process. You're going to be able to have an increased amount there. So if you're asking for, hey, here's what the specific stats we see from various customers who apply this, I don't have those at hand. That's something I might get with Brian, and we can follow up on some of our customers who've done this.
Okay. Another question. How does this affect the time it takes to sell from start to finish?
Well, we're not adding anything that's going to take longer. Hopefully this should be reducing the time to sell, because once that person comes in for their showroom appointment, we're hopefully reducing the entire time from the moment they walk in the door to the close of the sale. Because the questions they've had haven't changed. The customer still has the questions. The only thing we're doing is making it faster to get them answers. Whereas it used to be that you might have to have a person, oh, I've got to walk over to my desk, or let me get to my sales manager and get back to you, and all of these things that extend the time the process takes. We're talking about something that can eliminate those minutes and can be very, very effective in shortening the time from the moment the person walks in the door at their appointment or their walk-in and when they actually start to sign paperwork.
All right. Well, that's the last question that we have right now. I'd like to a couple things before we close. One more reminder, everybody. If you haven't joined Auto Success webinars, and I know if you come to a lot of webinars, I probably sound like a broken record, but you know, if you haven't joined Auto Success webinars yet, please do. It's a group on Facebook where you can find out about future webinars. You can interact with the speakers and also other attendees. And also, I'd really like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. And Kevin, I appreciate you taking the time to share this information with everybody. This is a really cool new concept. Actually, you know what? We just got another one. Thank you, guys. So you got a couple different compliments. But yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Kevin, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we let them go?
The only thing I'd say is we have a lot of great ways, solutions beyond just the mobile showroom quarterback idea for improving your auto dealer's operations through better communications technology. You can check us out at vertical.com/auto and find out all about that.
Perfect. Well, hey, everybody, thank you for coming. I hope you take the time to join us again for a future webinar, and have a great week. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot, Brian.